Hi, welcome back to the garden, and it is a very soggy garden. It's been raining for the last few days and the plants have been loving it, I have to say, but so have the weeds. So because of the rain, I haven't had as much time as I'd like to be out here working and finishing all these projects. I have weeding, I have edging, I have lots of mulch to put. I'm redoing the wood chips in all these gardens. You can definitely see the difference between the new mulch and the old mulch over there. So that's one of them. I also have to finish pulling out all of the spring crops and finally finish planting my summer crops. And I'm working in the upper garden first today. I'm calling this the upper garden this year instead of the vegetable garden because it's mostly full of flowers, although we'll have a look at some veggies that I do have over on the right hand side. But we're also putting in a nice brick edging because I'm tired of all of this grass, and we have creeping buttercup and other things that tend to grow in towards the garden. It's just so prolific, and we've been lucky enough to get a whole bunch of these bricks for free. So we're going to continue this edging throughout this entire garden and see if that makes a difference and cuts down on my time that I have to spend edging a few times a year. I'm also going to finish mulching around the kids' garden right here, which we finished planting this past week. So as I came down to start weeding, I see my asparagus has completely fallen over. Although having said that, I didn't exactly tie it back that securely. And I'm pretty sure one of my stands of sweet peas is under there. Oh, geez. No, that's my green onions. My sweet peas are over there. I think this is year 5 for this asparagus, and we did harvest quite a bit this spring. Probably not as much as I could have. I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to have to come up with a permanent solution back here, but that is not for today. Let's see. Okay. Well, that's not too bad. It looks kind of cool. I think I can live with that. While I'm at it, I have 2 spots where I planted sweet peas that I should have come back and put some stakes for them to climb on that week instead of a month and a half later. So we need to do that right now too so that I can tie these up. Oh, there. That should be fine because it's going to start to get too hot for these sweet peas pretty soon. And I have one more patch a few rows over. And these poor things are actually flowering too. But once I get these tied up, that might free some ground up to plant a few more things. This is the time of year when your cool-loving plants are going to start going off a bit, and your heat-loving plants will start to take off. But if you're smart about using shade, you can keep some of those cooler loving plants like lettuce or cilantro. That's always a big one. Spinach. And growing for yourself, you don't need too much, so I could easily grow a little patch of cilantro underneath these sweet peas. Mosquitoes found me. So we can see how nice these first few rows look. I did all of the weeding and then topped it up with some nice fresh wood chips, and that looks great. But that stops right there. 4 of the walkways are done. I have 3 left and 4 rows left to weed. One benefit of the ground being this wet is the weeds pull out so much easier. Squirrels are planting oak trees for me again. That is all the weeding, and that only took me about 20 minutes. So now I have to fill the remaining 3 paths with wood chips and then move on to the next job. Can we take a minute and appreciate the color on this delphinium? Just over 6 feet tall, this bloom stalk, grown from seed last year. And then 2 more bloom stalks right over here that are a full foot taller. So 7.5 feet. I'll have to measure these. Hello, I am popping in while editing, and since it has taken me a while to get to that, I can show you what these bloom stalks look like a full week later. Well, it is not sunny today, but it sure is humid. I'm glad to get that project done, and I actually got a good start yesterday on the raised bed gardens. Here are the 4 raised beds that were filled with spring flowers. This one had the bulk of my ranunculus. It's now been ripped out, and I had a whole bunch of Bells of Ireland go to seed here this spring. So I did give away about 40 of them. I ripped out the smaller ones, and I relocated the rest around the front. And then the next row that you see are dahlias that I grew from seed, and these are likely to be really short border dahlias. But I want to find a few that I really, really like that I can keep the tubers. And then just behind that, it looks empty, but these are the rest of my cutting dahlias. There are 2 rows of 6 back there, spaced a foot apart, and the rows are about 18 inches apart. So they should come up shortly. Bed number 2 was my tulip bed, and this got ripped out a couple of weeks ago, and dahlias were planted here too, and you can see they're coming up really nicely. Here we have 3 rows of 6, I do believe. I think I have 30 cutting dahlias in all. And just yesterday I came through and pinched the taller of these dahlias. And it's not hard to see why that's important. This stalk is about as thick as my thumb. That would have been really hard to work with in bouquets, and you can already see the side shoots starting to grow. And we'll also get side shoots from this point down here too. So last year was a really funny year for dahlias. It was a terrible year in general. I didn't get a whole lot of blooms. They were really late. But that wasn't specific to me. I heard other growers say the same. When I dug them up last year, I didn't label them, so I don't know what I have. But once they start to bloom, I'm going to recognize them, and then I'll make sure I label them. Now, bed number 3 just got ripped out yesterday as well, and in fact, there is the result right here. These are all of the daffodils that were in bed number 3, and they are separated by variety. And I'm going to let the foliage die back and then store the bulbs until fall, when I'm going to plant them in the ornamental beds out front. And before we look at what's inside this bed, I want to point out what is growing literally out the front of it. This is a Rudbeckia, and just a wild variety of Rudbeckia. It doesn't look like it is my big cutting variety, but it's literally growing between the boards of this raised bed. Isn't it funny how we put so much effort into babying our seedlings, hoping they'll survive, and then sometimes nature just takes care of itself. So this bed will not be used for cut flowers, except for that wild Rudbeckia. Instead, I've planted some tomatoes. We have 2 super sweet 100s, those are cherries, 2 sun gold tomatoes, and then some beefsteaks in the back that I got from a local farmer because I accidentally sold all of mine. And then behind there we have cucumbers. So the back 2 are gherkins, and then we have Space Master, I think, and then we have Suyo Long. And this is a little bit out of place. These are some alliums that I found when pulling up the daffodils that I forgot were here. So hopefully I'll be able to get those blooms, and then I'll move these to the ornamental beds as well. And look, we have garlic scapes. If this is something that is new to you, if you have hardneck garlic planted, this will turn into a flower spike. But if you snap these off, they snap off really easily. Take it inside, cut off this part of it. The rest is delicious. I'm going to come through and pull the rest of these off later tonight, or maybe even tomorrow, because I can do this in the rain. We've made a good dent in the wood chip pile. This started out as about 5 cubic yards, and I'd say we've used more than half at this point. This is the point in the evening where I'm starting to get really overwhelmed because I'm hungry and I want supper, but there's so much left to do, and it's going to pour with rain tomorrow. So where do I prioritize my time? And really what should be prioritized more than anything is planting. It's a really good time for direct seeding things, and I have done some of that. where we were just wood chipping up in the upper garden, I put some cilantro seed, and actually in and around those tomatoes I just showed you, I put in some spinach seed. So the tomatoes are going to get tall and the spinach is only going to be 12 inches or so, especially if I keep it harvested. So that's a perfect use of that extra 10 inches or so at the front of that bed. I also need to direct seed my next round of cutting sunflowers, and I don't even know what else. I've got seedlings everywhere. So yeah, I need to find something to plant. I'll come back for that garlic scape later. Now you might remember I had ranunculus in the greenhouse too. That has all been ripped out, and the only thing that's in here in the moment are seedlings. That means that this U-shaped bed that is sort of half covered with pots right now, this entire space is ready to be planted, and I can do that in the pouring rain because it's a greenhouse. So I think what I'm going to do next is, I've just found this tray of Fata Morgana scabiosa pincushion flowers that still need to be planted. This is not a whole lot of plants. I'm going to plug this somewhere in the front yard, I think, and I should have room up there to direct sow a whole bunch of sunflowers. So let's go and do that. Now the front yard is really meant to end up being perennial landscape, but I'm just taking advantage of the space for this year while I figure out what exactly that is going to look like. Now, if you remember this space from last year, you'll remember that I got almost zero production out of it. A handful of 18-inch tall sunflowers is pretty much it. And that was due to the fact that the soil that I used here, which was delivered by a local company, was not that great. I don't think it was contaminated with anything. I think that the garden soil with extra organic matter that I paid for ended up being not that. But this year, it's a completely different story. I added a lot of manure, a lot of compost, and a little bit of extra organic feed too, just to make sure that I had a productive space here this year. I think this little space here is where we're going to put this scabiosa. I did come through here and do a bit of a weed about 3 days ago when it was still sunny, but I'll do it more thoroughly when these sunflowers come out. So in my experience last year, I noticed that the scabiosa got really tall, but there wasn't a lot of bulk, not a ton of foliage to it, which means I don't have to worry too much about spacing. And in fact, with really tall, thin plants like that, putting them closer together is often better because they can help support themselves. I'm actually even leaving these in kind of clumps, but I will leave a little more space between the rows to compensate. Now, sometimes I do like to experiment with close spacing with things like the scabiosa, which isn't really a very important crop for me. And in theory, it seems like it would work really well. And if not, the loss is not really a big deal. So this is nothing more than what was a really low spot in the yard that I took advantage of for growing space. All right, that's it for day 2. I'm gonna go have supper and we'll be back for day 3. And day 3 was mostly spent planting up some pots as well as the greenhouse. In these pots this year, I used a mix of ProMix and also coconut coir. More on that later. So first I had to plant some sweet potato slips, and since these pots are quite large, I put 3 slips in each of the 2 pots, and when we see what the yield is in the fall, I'll know if that needs to be adjusted. I've grown sweet potatoes before, just not in pots. So we'll see. Next, a few cherry tomatoes, just 1 per pot, and a couple smaller pots with rosemary. I put 4 in each because I plan on cutting it fairly heavily. And then I emptied all the seedlings out of the greenhouse so that I could make room to plant the rest of my tomatoes and peppers. I also stuck a few more rosemary seedlings in there too and gave it all a really good watering. And since it's been over a week since I actually filmed this, because it's taken me so long to get to the editing, I can show you these updates and tell you that everything is growing really, really well. So as always, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'm always very grateful for all the likes and comments. And also thank you so much for watching, and I will see you back in the garden really soon.